Ladies and gentlemen, this is internet personality Vangelus here with a review of the Soul of Chogokin GX-54, Tobikage, and Kurojishi. This came to me thanks to the Robot Ninja Dojo of HLJ. These guys are packed together and come from some anime cartoon that I have not actually watched, but that didn't stop me from looking up YouTube clips to figure out exactly how these two are related, at least in the first episode. They come as a pair, and they are not the only Tobikage Soul of Chogokins out there, but for now I'll just be focusing on this 2-pack. So let's take a closer look at Kurojishi to kick things off. Kurojishi's got a classic super robot vibe in the blocky chunk of his aesthetics. It's a clean and simple sculpt with pleasant patches of extra detail here and there on the surface. The color scheme is striking in a way that brings out the edges and corners of Kurojishi's design. Clean yellows over solid blacks provide a harsh but effective contrast. This all comes together in his head sculpt, which features some incredibly intricate fine lines in both the sculpt and paint. Those teeny teeth on his lion helmet are really tiny and pointy. Being a Soul of Chogokin, the first question's probably going to be, where's the Chogokin? Well, for diecast, this guy's got a bunch in his feet and legs, a bunch here, and a whole big whack of it in his back. I don't know the specifics, all I know is that he's got weight to him, and he makes that noise when you drop him. He's also got posable cannons on his belly, and he's actually got a whole lot of posability, and for a chunky robot like this, it's very cool to see. There's a ball-jointed head, I've said this many times, but emotion is visible here, which is odd, because he's a piloted robot as far as I know. The shoulder, clunky ratchet, this is for transformation, but you do kind of have a forward shoulder motion as well. The bicep, swivel, and elbow all works as it should. There's a ball-jointed wrist with a little bit of leeway for wiggle. No waist joint. Due to the transformation, I can kind of see why. Bummer that's not there, but I'll survive. The legs, again. Oh man, these are tight joints that probably involve lots of metal, and you also get this joint as well, and they do move a little bit outwards, but it seems to be a special hinge designed for this, and it also doesn't have a ton of range, so that's a little bit of a bummer, but when you see the shape of his hips, you can kind of tell why that wouldn't work. He's got a thigh swivel, he's got a little bit of ankle posability with, again, a devoted joint just for this, and his knees, oh, I love it! Oh, I love it. Very solid. So, he's not the most super posable robot in the world, but he is a very posable robot for this aesthetic. But what's posability without a few things to pose with? Let's accessorize, ladies and gentlemen. Have you been thinking to yourself, man, Kurojishi's got fists, and I don't like fists? If you've been thinking that, you're kind of weird, but don't worry, you've also got a set of open hands. So he's got a pair of fists and a pair of these hands. Swapping them's real easy because it's just a case of popping the hands off of the little ball joint and then sticking on the new ones. His third pair of hands are these, which are designed to hold things. He also totally has a turtle mode, I guess. These holding things hands are a little bit strange because they kind of work, but also have strange limitations. They work best with his beam saber accessory. It's all translucent and whatnot, because it's thin enough to just kind of like cram itself into the hole between his fingers, and he holds it quite solidly. It's not going to fall out, that's all good. Let's move on to his other sword, a slightly more traditional katana, and one that begins to show the problem with his hands. That being, this thing's a lot bigger than the opening in there, so you might be confused as to how this works. You're basically just supposed to bend his fingers out, kind of stuff it in there, turn it the right way, and again, it's held very solidly because the hands are made of a flexible plastic that does spring back into shape. So it's a little bit scary putting this in, but that's okay. He has one other accessory he's able to hold, that being his Gatling laser gun thing with its flip-up sight. Thing is that he's supposed to hold it with two hands, and of course, you know, being a dual-gripped weapon, it is easier to stick his hands onto the weapon first, then plug them into his body, or his arms. I don't know why you'd want hands sticking out of his nipples, but whatever. The problem comes in the very almost puzzle-like way that you've got to stick this hand on here. It took me a while, but I figured out you've got to hook the thumb around the handle, and the crux of this problem is the fact that the fingers almost connect with the thumb near the top of their sculpt. So you have to bend a whole lot of stuff out of the way almost in preparation to get this gun handle in there. And while you're doing this, you're also bending the thumb to a really frightening angle, one that makes me think it's going to rip sometime. Then you twist it around here, and then bend the fingers up and over the handle, and now the hand is on there. it really feels like something was missed there, and it relies too much on a bendable plastic that, for all intents and purposes, could rip someday. I really wish that they had done a mechanism by which you just lift off a panel, slide the thing over the handle, and then close the panel up over top of the handle again. Either way, once he's holding this, then hey, his giant-ass Gatling gun no jutsu is clearly full of chi and very strong. This is pretty cool. I like that he can pull off holding this two-handed and in front of his belly, and he's totally like, hey, guess what, I'm shooting laser guns. It just is tricky to get him to grip it. Once you figure out the trick of getting the hands on those handles, it's not too bad, but I am still worried about how much I have to bend them. But hey, on the bright side, a ninja robot with a giant Gatling gun, nowhere near as interesting to look at as a ninja robot with swords. And the swords are the easiest accessories for him to hold. Kurojishi's a pretty cool package of a robot, with the only major weakness being the trickiness in getting him to hold the Gatling gun. But what about Tobikage? Tobikage reminds me of some of the best qualities of perfect effects work. His diminutive figure contains a lot of the clean and simple detailings found in his larger partner robot. The crispness of the paint and the fine detail of the sculpt serve to remind you that this is a higher-end piece of Bandai work. I particularly like both the mesh sculpting and the black lining around his optics. And being Soul of Chogokin, is there any Chogokin on this guy? I think so, because he feels like he has a small weight in him somewhere, I just don't know where it is. He's also got some decent posability for such a tiny figure, and when I say tiny, let me show you what he looks like next to your average G.I. Joe Cobra Trooper who's also standing on a little stand. So, he's just a tad shorter than a G.I. Joe, and that's pretty cool, as it also makes him in scale with Kurojishi. His posability is, again, a ball-jointed neck. This and all of the joints seem a little bit more impressive to me given his size. He's got a ball-joint ab-crunch waist thing. Actually, no, he has a ball-joint ab-crunch and a ball-joint waist, which is a little bit frivolous, but hey, what you gonna do? These shoulder pads don't move, but they do get up out of the way really easily so you can move his arms around, and he's got double-jointed elbows. Double-jointed anything on this scale makes me really pleased. His hips have ball-jointed rotation. His knees are strange. For a natural look, you can bend them here, and then for an unnatural look with a double joint, you can bend them here. Unfortunately, this does not look very good. It's for the transformation, and I understand why it happened, but it is a kind of a bummer that he almost has, like, full-on awesome posability, and he is marred slightly by that one weird aesthetic thing. Otherwise, he's got ball-jointed ankles as well, and more or less can stand in a lot of poses pretty easily, provided that he's got a bit of a center of balance. It helps that his feet have these giant heel spurs, so I've not had many problems of Tobikage falling over. And he also has his own series of accessories, which is kind of clued to you by this thing on his back. So let's take a look at how he uses this and more. Oh man, now he fell over. Thanks a lot. You call yourself a ninja? You little mesh. You don't even have a face. Oh god, man, I am totally not hiring you for assassinations anytime in the future. Did I mention it's really early in the morning? First up, let's cover extra hands. Tobikage has the same set of hands that Kurojishi has. Aside from his fists, he's also got some open hands, which are kind of big, actually, but I can dig it. And switching his hands is interesting, because they're on this combination wrist swivel joint, and you can actually just pull the whole thing off. So every set of hands has an entire joint built onto it, which I kind of like. And his third set of hands, just like Kurojishi, are designed to hold things. And this guy has all kinds of stuff he can hold. Starting off with the scabbard on his back. You can actually remove this. And inside is a sword. This sword can also be plugged into the scabbard like thus, making it into a naginata of some sort. This really doesn't feel natural at all, and it's bending the fingers hardcore. I don't recommend this weapon mode in particular. I don't really like how often this thing seems to want to make you just bend the fingers like that. On the bright side, he can also just hold this thing like a sword. I know, it's kind of crazy. And it works pretty well like this. It's sized quite nicely. This isn't the only thing it can do, though. You can actually replace this with a completely separate version that has a knife sticking out of the bottom, so as he can totally, like, cut a dude and then just stab him in the eyes, which I am kind of into. I like some eye stabbing. And there's another version of the sheath, which has a trigger pointing down. So instead of having that built into this as some kind of weird transformation, they just kind of have it as a separate sculpted piece. which you can then jam into here, or you can jam the sword into it. Whatever you want to jam in, just start sticking things into things. That's how I tend to work in real life. And now he's got a shotgun, which I think is actually kind of cool. I like these options. They're a little bit strange given the lack of context I have for the show he's from, but nonetheless, I kind of like them. These aren't the only swords and weapons he's got, though. Tobikage's also got this cool little gimmick where you can slide out these panels to reveal like little grenade or shuriken launchers, I suppose. And it's a cool detail to include, but I almost question if it was even necessary. That said, it's solo Chogokin, so when they do this stuff, I tend to go like, yeah, that's right, you guys are crazy. He's also got a shield, which actually has a tab that can plug into his forearm. There's a slot on each forearm for this thing. So you just plug it in there, and it's very solidly in place. And he also has this rifle. And between these two things, I actually think he looks really cool, just armed with this stuff. And so he can shoot things, and he can block attacks. And then, that's not all, ladies and gentlemen. You can combine these two weapons. And again, it's quite solid how they go together. There's no real scariness to this. It just slides together, even clicks in place. And then, this is a Thunder Arrow gun. That's what the manual says. I've never actually used a Thunder Arrow gun myself, but I'm pretty sure that Thunder Arrows are excellent for repelling all kinds of foes and or small pests. There you go, Thunder Arrow gun in place. That's a lot of playability for what is a simple accessory robot to Kurojishi. So, despite this being the smaller version of Tobikage that's meant to be combined with the other Tobikage robot buddies, I really appreciate that he's not only got a lot of posability, but he has a lot of playability too, even though he's got kind of weird knees. But enough of this malarkey. I said combination, and we're gonna combine some damn robots! Kurojishi's transformation is conceptually very basic and predictable, more or less dropping to all fours and swapping his robot head for a lion head. The delightful intricacies one would hope for from an SoC transforming robot show up in how the head and torso convert. And how the lower or hind legs reform themselves. Another big win is just how solidly all the motions, simple or involved, carry themselves out. Tobikage basically folds up into a ball to form the stomach of the lion. He's also incredibly hard to plug into Kurojishi. I recommend unfolding and inserting the legs first, before pushing the rest of Tobikage inside. Line up his heels with the slots in Kurojishi's back, grip him in place with the awesomely copious locking mechanisms, and you're ready to roar. Joining a long pedigree of predatory robot felines, the transformed and combined Kurojishi and Tobikage bring a retro combination of style and sleek chunk. The only major sticking point for me are the larger blocks of yellow on the hind legs. And yes, Tobikage's contribution to this mode is minimal at best. Otherwise, the lion mode maintains the simple charm and clean look of the robot mode. Much like Kurojishi's helmet, the lion mode's teeth are so small and pointy that I feel a little bit worried about breaking them off someday. As far as posability goes, this guy has like all of Kurojishi's joints from his robot mode, which helps out a lot in the lion mode, because with the arm posability you get this kind of spread ability, and in the rear, thanks to the way that this inward and outward hip joint motion worked on the robot mode, you can get the hind legs to point outwards a little bit as well, and thanks to that, you get a pretty decent feline stance without it looking a little bit too robotic. His tail also moves. In fact, as an attack, you can have it come up over his head and start shooting stuff. Same thing for the little lasers on his temples. And his mouth also opens and closes, along with this little thing. I'm not really sure what this is for. But opening the mouth is a little bit tricky because it's tempting to just stick your fingernail into the lip. And the thing is that, as I said before, the teeth are so small and pointy that it feels like they might just come off if your fingernail hits them the wrong way. So be careful of that. They're also pointy in a way that might be painful. And you'll also see he has this tab on the top of his mouth. That's because he can actually use one of the accessories in this mode. The big ol' manual sword has a tab hole right here, and that works with the tab on the inside of the roof of his mouth, so that you can attach the sword in there securely, and then have him close his mouth up around it. I think that's really cool, because they could have just said, "Oh, just stick it in his mouth, it'll work," and then it would have been in there, but a little bit flimsy. This way, the sword is in his mouth, but it's really solid. And I don't know what this is for in terms of the show. I'm guessing he, like, runs past a dude and cuts him. But I kind of like the look of this, and I appreciate that they went so far as to put in a tab just to facilitate this feature. The GX-54 set contains a lot of play value within its pair of robotic ninja warriors. Each has the accessory loadout expected of a Soul of Chogokin figure, and their somewhat finicky transformation gimmick rounds out their abilities nicely. However, the lack of a display stand does negatively impact the overall finish of the package for me. It definitely does not bring down the entire set on a notable level, but it's a bummer to have to sort out storage for all the alternate hands and weapons myself, with figures from a line that often covers that for you. All that said, unless something aesthetically offends you, Tobikage and Kurojishi are a very fun pair of figures, and recommended for fans of solid retro robot goodness. Anyway, this has been Internet Personality Vangelus, and I hope that you got something out of this video. I got something out of all this. I learned me some no jutsu. So it's time for my additive crossfade no jutsu! And now my cross-dissolve no jutsu! And now my Cho Maru Shinken Dai Katana Moshidashi Chinchinko Oinaru no jutsu!